Okay, this is the second part of the JJRC H12C upgrades for MIA Microflight. I have finally finished the frame. This is the frame that is going to be housing all the electronics here. This is all still attached to the control board. Basically what I did is I just took this out, just removed there's 4 screws that hold the flight controller, and there's a few more screws that hold this little board here, which is for your switch and for your camera, and there's another one for the charging jack. So I removed all those little screws from the body and pulled all that out. If you're very careful, you can get this out intact without having to fray or break the wires loose from the connections. But if you do that, it's not that hard. I'll be focusing in on where the motors connect and the LED connects in case you happen to break one of these connections. All you need to do is just solder those little wires back onto the board. In fact, it would be, I think, a little bit easier if we just remove all this, desolder all these connections from the board and just leave the board itself, with this other little board here as a unit, and that way it'll be easier to install on the frame. Now the frame here has been already assembled. This is a 2-layer frame, and it's done in a sandwich form to sandwich all these components. In fact, the weight came out very much the same weight as these components here at the top, the bottom of the body, the battery cover, and the landing gear. The only thing this one doesn't have is landing gear, but we're going to keep this very streamlined, and I'm not going to use the landing gear that I typically use on some of these things. If you'll remember, I mentioned in the first part of the video that I did some upgrades for the Blade MQX when that came out back in 2011. In 2012, I believe, is when I did those upgrades, and I started doing my own landing gear, kind of similar to what these quads have. But that was before these quads came out on the market. So I used to do that with the landing gear. So for this one, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to provide a landing gear very similar to my Trainer FPV Quad that you've seen in some of the videos that I've been uploading, titled How I Learned to Fly FPV. So I'm going to be doing something similar here with some cushions here just to provide the cushion that you need. This landing gear here, as it comes, it's great. I mean, it's very lightweight plastic, but it's very rigid, and the way this sits on the model is it's a little too rigid. So when you come down, it comes down a little too hard. It doesn't have any cushion to it. You could bend this. I mean, you could use this if you're still using it in the existing stock form. You could heat these areas here and bend it a little just to give you a little more flex when you land. But since we're doing this upgrade frame, there's no need to do that, and I'll show that in my next video how this is done with the landing gear that I employ on my FPV Trainer that I've shown in previous videos. So this is the frame, and it's been designed, like I said, to house all these components in sandwich form. Everything's nylon hardware just to keep things lightweight, and it's coming out as a pretty rigid frame. I mean, the way it's sandwiched this way. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this top plate here so that we can install the board. And the board can be double-sided, sticky taped to the plate here in between these two. You can just put it with double-sided tape, and that should hold the flight controller, very similar to the way I'm doing the MIA Trainer Quad-Copter using the MQX parts. But I did provide provisions here for nylon screws that are in line with the mounting holes of this particular controller board. If you can take my word for this, go get yourself one of these, fly it the way it is stock, and if you break the frame, you can do the upgrade, with the MIA Microflight parts here. This is also designed to hold those little cameras. I mean, I did make provisions here between the two plates where you can install the camera, and the great thing about this particular frame, and it's got a couple little other parts which I'm not showing here that are part of the camera. I'll show that in the next video, but you can see how I'm doing this, and it protects not only the camera but also the antenna. It's very important. I mean, there are a lot of quads out there. I mean, what people typically do is they go buy these little cameras and they pop them right on top. With the cameras on top, you know, you have the antenna exposed, and typically the antennas go, you know, you roll this, you're going to flip this, you know, they guarantee you're going to flip this thing, and if you have the antenna or the cameras mounted on top, you're going to ruin those, you know, components. So, you know, if you look at my FPV Trainer Quad that I did in my previous videos, how I learned to fly FPV, you'll notice that my camera is well protected. So, I mean, even if I land upside down, nothing happens to the camera, nothing happens to the antenna. So it's well guarded there. And so that's the same idea that I'm going to be employing in this frame, upgrade frame for this particular H12C. Now, because there are many other models that are very similar to the H12C, this frame will also work with some other models, going by the assumption that the distance between the motors is going to be very similar to these guys. And I know for a fact that there are many of these types of quadcopters, and even a little bit larger ones, you know, use the same gearboxes. So if you have this type of gearbox, even if you buy the gearboxes separate and you buy a nice controller, you can still use this frame. So, you know, you're not locked into using these particular components, because you can put your own components there, you know, if you want to. You can even put brushless motors here, you know, so it's a very versatile frame, and that's the way I wanted to make this frame, not just for this, but, you know, for other things. It's the way I like doing things. You know, I like to almost kill as many birds with one stone as possible. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not, but in this case, you know, this is a very flexible and very versatile frame. So in the next video, I'm going to be showing the parts already on the frame. As I said, this frame has been pre-assembled here, and it's just to give you an insight, you know, just a preview of what the frame looks like. It's very lightweight, but it does need to be taken apart. I need to take this plate on top off, you know, to install the circuit board in the center. It's got slots also for all the other little components, very similar to the plastic part that was done originally for the stock one. It fits in their own little cubby holes, nice and neat there. And also the LEDs, you know, this has provisions for the LEDs to go on these little pockets here. It's got these little pockets for the LEDs, so the LEDs can pop right in there. The wires can be tucked underneath here between the frame, nice and neat, and they're out of the way. So, you know, you have almost like a typical FPV racing quad style, but made as an upgrade, you know, for these toy grades. So anyway, this is Mario with MIA Microflight. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for my next video.